Hello everyone, it's time to do another V deck profile, this time on my favorite Gold Paladin archetype, the Bluish Flame Liberator. Or you could simply call this the Prominence Core deck, because I love my human that can transform into the badass dragon. And Prominence Core, believe it or not, is actually what got me to like this archetype a lot. Because ever since it got introduced back in the Legion era, I was a big fan of playing it, but it was a little expensive as every Legion deck out there at the time. So ever since they reintroduced stuff in V, I was praying for Bluish Flame Liberators. In fact, I was praying for the Quadra Knights to return, because that would mean I would get to see my Quadra Knight archetypes, mainly the Bluish Flame Liberators, but unfortunately that never happened. But we did get a manga version with Galard, the character who played Bluish Flames in the manga and Kai's main rival there, and technically also Kai's main rival in the Legion era. So I am glad to see its return. Especially once with Percival return, I was having hopes that Prominence Core would return as well. We did get the Prominence Glare, but not the Prominence Glare I wanted. It's not Bluish Flame. So unfortunately, we do not have a Prominence Glare that is Bluish Flame. But anyway, let's start off with the deck, with how this deck runs. So basically, this deck is all about generating value. That's really all it is. You basically just call a bunch of stuff during your main phase, and then they all get power. It's just so much value from Prominence Core, because that's what Prominence Core is going to do. But this deck does lack a decent finisher. Yes, we do have finishers for other Gold Paladins, especially like it's generic. The only thing is, I want the in-archetype finisher like usual. Kind of have that in Prominence Glare, but it's not that great, I must admit. And I also must admit that this deck isn't as great as Spectral Duke, but this is my favorite Gold Paladin archetype, so I just have to play it. This is more of a fun deck, if anything. So how you're going to be playing this deck most of the time is, you're going to be trying to get your Percival as soon as you can, and then Percival will get the Aglovale, because that's his partner in crime. And then once you put the Percival into your soul, your Prominence Core, his evolved form, will be at full power. And that's basically how you're going to run this deck. But like I said, this deck does lack a finisher, so there can be some issues, especially when you're going to be relying on Percival and Aglovale to generate most of your value. But anyway, let's begin with what gift marker you want to choose. You could go either. I'm just going to say that right now. Because if you want to go full force attack, Excel 1 might be good. Because you are going to call a lot of stuff, but they're going to be 4 random cards, spoiler alert. And they can lack power sometimes, especially to beat over force numbers. So Excel 1 can be good, but if you want to generate more draw power and all that, definitely Excel 2. Because this deck has so much variety of ways to build it that you could even put aggravate stuff in it. Because like I said before, the Prominence Core will let you call 4 cards with his own skill, which will trigger some of your aggravate support cards within the year back at set 10. That can be nice, because that one draw can technically count as 1 card to call. So you do have value in either one. It just depends on the matchup. If you're playing a more control-heavy matchup, definitely go Excel 2, just so you could replenish some of your minuses. But if you're not going to be afraid of minusing anything, definitely go full beatdown. But it all depends on you. But anyway, to the deck. So, we start off with the MVP of Gold Paladins right now. The base form, Bluish Flame Liberator Percival. So, his skill is, the first one is a Vanguard only skill, where all your additional rear guards get plus 5k power. It could fix some numbers, it could be nice, but you're mostly not going to use this skill at all. And there's really no reason to ride it on Vanguard unless you have no choice. But his second skill is a Vanguard and rear guard, where it is a hard once per turn, but on place you can combust 1 and discard a card. Get an imaginary gift Excel, so that's Excel marker acceleration right there. And then you call 1 Oath Liberator Aglovale from your deck or drop zone. That is very nice, because you could call his partner in crime pretty much from anywhere if you need it. And also getting 1 Excel marker, yeah, that speeds up a lot of things. Even if it's a hard once per turn, this is just really good. You just need to be at grade 3 to do so. But one thing I really like to do is that before you hit grade 3, yes, that will prevent you from activating both skills, is that I would like to try to have him called out before your grade 3 turn, and then try to get an Aglovale. This is so once you go to Prominence Core, your Prominence Core will be at full power right when you hit your grade 3 turn. Because the Aglovale can put the Percival in Soul, and you do want Percival in Soul just to make your Prominence Core at full power as evolve form purposes. But main MVP of Gold Paladin, it is completely generic, so you could run this in any Gold Paladin deck. But in particular, this one really needs it to give you full power. It's just way too good not to run. But anyway, time to continue off. Time to evolve him to his dragon form, Bluish Flame Liberator, Prominence Core. So he has two skills, both Vanguard only. The first one is a once per turn, counterblast 1. Retire one of your rear guards, so meaning you could run some of your Vortimers if you want. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and then choose 2 of them and call them to open rear guards. But if you have Percival in your soul, you could call 4 instead. Yeah, counterblast 1, sacrifice 1, and you get 4 cards. Yeah, that's like good value right there. Especially with the second skill, Persona Flame Blue Linkage. Each time your rear guard is called, that rear guard gets plus 3k power, and this card gets plus 3k power. And if that card happens to be Aglovel, while your opponent's at grade 3, the crit becomes 2. That crit of 2 comes up sometimes, but I just hate the factor that both players have to be at grade 3, and also that the crit doesn't stack, because if the crit stacks, it could be much more threatening early game. But anyway, the first skill correlates well with the second skill, because first skill pretty much calls at least 2 cards, which they both get plus 3k power, and himself with 6k power. But if you go full power, it's going to be plus 12k power. So it's just generating free value. It's so good for recovery play. Yeah. You won't be activating its skill every single turn, I must admit, because depending on the matchup, you might have like a lot of rear guards, and you're probably not going to use a counterblast just to try to generate at least 2 rear guards most of the time. But it's just overall just good value. You could just run this as a recovery play, because I'm pretty sure everyone is going to run Percivals in their decks. So yeah, good recovery card as well. Next, for my last grade 3. So like I said before, this deck lacks a finisher, and this one can kind of act as a finisher, and this is also not to play Spectral Duke, because I don't want to stay on Spectral Duke, because the minute I read Spectral Duke, I'm going to be staying on Spectral Duke. So I'm choosing Prominence Glare of the Azure Flames. Yes, it's not Bluish Flames, but it's closest to the theme. I wish we get Bluish Flame Liberator, Prominence Glare, so we get the full power Percival. But anyway, his skill is that when you place it on Vanguard, you can look at top 4 cards of your deck and then call one of them to rear guard. This will add up because you do want to call more cards for his second skill, because the second skill is that when it attacks, you can counterblast 1 and discard a card, and then activate the skills below depending on the number of cards you call during the turn. 3 or more, 15k plus crit, and then 4 or more, Sentinel Guard Restrict. So you do have that as a finisher. It's kind of like a waterfall ability. But one reason why I decided to run this card is that if you go first, or if you're on your first grade 3 turn and you need to ride something, this could be a better ride. Because I'd rather ride something that could just pressure my opponent right away. And it could also be a finisher as well. Because most of the time, once you hit your grade 3 turn, you don't really have a field set up. And this will kind of encourage you to set up a field, and it can give pressure as well, because it has that 1 extra crit and a guard restrict on top of it. So unless your opponent has a heal guardian, it can hurt badly. I did originally run Agravain, because Agravain can put stuff to soul, and you do use a little bit of soul, but Aglovel can generate your soul too, so it's not that big of a deal. So this is more of early game pressure. Because one problem I found with Agravain is that Agravain, you're going to be doing a lot more lower pokes, and they could be stopped by a trigger. This one pretty much just crit pressures, and it kind of forces your opponent to either use a lot of cards in their hand or forces their heal guardians. So in my opinion, I see this card better than Agravain. Yes, Agravain can still be pretty good, especially if you have Percival on your rear guard and you could just put in your soul while you don't have an Aglovel. So you do have that. But I do find the crit pressure very helpful, especially when you're the one who went first and you cannot get your Prominence Core at full power right away. So yeah, and you could run Spectral Duke, but like I said, I do not want to end up at Spectral Duke, because the minute I'm at Spectral Duke, this is going to feel more like a Spectral Duke deck, because I'm just going to stay there. And also because this is part of the theme, so why not? So that's it for the grade 3 lineup. Time for the grade 2 lineup. So you must run this at 4 of the Oath Liberator Aglovel. His first skill is the Vanguard only skill, where on place you can counterblast 1, look at top 4 cards of your deck, and then call one of them, and then put the rest of the bottom of the deck in any order. You will use this sometimes. It is your main Vanguard ride target, but most of the time you're going to be using it for its second skill, where on rear guard, when it attacks, you can put another rear guard to soul, so basically every card can be fodder for him. He gets plus 10k power, and then at the end of battle, it goes back to your hand. This is actually very important to set up your Prominence Core, because because you want to have as much of an open field as possible so your opponent's core can generate his full value. So you put something to soul and this back to your hand, you have 2 open spaces. That's basically why you want to use the second skill. There is other reasons too, like against control matchups, you could, instead of letting your opponent kill your stuff, you could turn your stuff into resources while getting back a 5k shield out of this card. And don't worry about guarding with him, because Percival can still call him back from the drop zone. And also, it helps out Prominence Core get an extra crit, which can be threatening sometimes. So there is no reason not to run 4. Technically, you could still cut it down to 3 or 2, because you're still going to be able to get this regardless, as long as you got Percival, but you don't want to rely on that all the time. Next, I run the Kaden because it doesn't have an on place on hand, so as long as you get on place, you can counterblast 1 and discard a card to look at top 3 cards of your deck and call 1. I mainly run this for 1, you could try to get your Percival early before you hit grade 3. And the other reason is because I do run the Kaiden to try to go play Beatdown with this deck with power numbers. It serves 2 purposes, so which is why I just decided to run it. And then the last grade 2 lineup is also up to you. I run Buridia because when it's placed by card ability, you can Soul Blast 1 to countercharge or Counterblast 1 to Soul Charge. It depends on you, but most of the time you're going to be Soul Blasting to countercharge because it's just more countercharge. I did run the Vortimer. The thing is, the Vortimer requires to get retired just to countercharge and put it to Soul. And the only thing that does that is in fact Prominence Core in this deck. So I do not want to over-restrict myself on ways of countercharging, so I decided to go with Burrita. But this grade 2 lineup could be anything you want, other than the Aglovale. The Aglovale is a must-run. The other grade 2s, you could literally run whatever you want. You could even run the Aggravate stuff as well, like the grade 2 that gets 5k power if you call 2 units, and an additional 10k if you call 4 units, but it goes to Soul afterwards. Because Brahmin's Core calls 4 units, so that 4 condition is not even an issue. The rest of the grade 2 lineup could be anything you want. But for now, I'm choosing this one just for more countercharging because you'll quite need it. And now for the grade 1 lineup, I run the Fast Chase Liberator Yosefis. Because basically this is Din Drain, except it has a Vanguard skill as well. When a card is placed on top of it, you can look at top card of your deck and call it. I mean, that is a +1. But the second skill is the main part, where when it's placed from your deck by your card ability, you can Soul Blast 1 to countercharge 1. And then you can Soul Blast another card to draw a card. So basically you can activate both things of Din Drain in one skill. The only thing is you don't get the I or, so that can be a hindrance sometimes. But most of the time you're going to use this for countercharging, and I only call from deck anyway, so this is definitely the better option. And then because I run Kaiden, of course I have to run Hoel, because when Hoel is on the field, their Kaiden skill also gives you a draw. But the skill of Hoel is that if a card is called at the same column with this unit during the turn, it gets plus 5k, but while Kaiden's on the field, plus 10k instead, which of course it just gives high power beatdown, and that's one of my reasons why I decided to run the Kaiden and Hoel lineup. You don't have to run it, there's other things that you can run, but considering that I want to run Kaiden anyway, just to try to get out Percival early as well, of course I'm going to run this card to mimicate some of the minus. And also because beatdown is nice. And then this last grade 1 is also up to you. Head Archer Basket. So its skill is that it's an act once per turn. You can counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1 to look at the top 3 cards of your deck to call one of them. Now why I decided to choose this is because I want more chances to call out the Percival and Aglovale, especially before hitting grade 3. That's mainly the reason why. And also it's an additional call. It's not on play, so you're not going to really waste it. So it does offer up some good recovery. I am thinking about taking this out for some other cards, like run Sagamore over this, because Sagamore can call something from hand, and that's just more ways to call out Percival before hitting grade 3, of course. The only thing is, Sagamore is a grade 3 himself, so that can be an issue. And I also do not want to make my grade 1 lineup be short of grade 1s. So, Biscot it is. But if you do not want to run the Biscots, you could go ahead and run more grade 3 searchers if you want, because grade 3 searchers are grade 3 searchers, especially when you have heal guardians. And also, Percivals are always nice to search. And now for my starter, I choose the Spring Breeze Messenger, choose whatever you want, and then I go for the 8 crits, the 4 draw PGs, and of course the 4 heal guardians. You could run the original heal triggers, but considering that you're going to be randomly calling stuff, I rather randomly call a grade 3 10k beat stick over a grade 0 5k heal trigger. So that's it for this deck profile. What do you guys think of it? What other suggestions that you can make for this deck? I mean, like I said before, you have so much variety in this deck that you could run pretty much any generic card in this deck. I did suggest the Agravain, and you could run some of the Agravain stuff in it because Prominence Core gives you 4 calls. And Percival is just generic, that you could literally run this in any Gold Paladin deck, and you could even just run Prominence Core as a recovery engine if you want to. But overall, I like this archetype. That's the only reason why I built it, and this is my favorite Gold Paladin archetype, with Spectral Duke being my second favorite. So I just had to build it. I know it's not as great as Spectral Duke, especially because Spectral Duke is more aggressive than this, but I really hope we get a Bluish Flame Liberator Prominence Glare eventually. Not this Prominence Glare, because mangas screw you for making the Azure Flame Prominence Glare. That is not as great. But anyway, overall this deck is just really fun. You can go full beatdown, pretty much run anything. The only thing you just have to run in this deck is these 3 cards. Other than that, you could run whatever you want for the deck. You could run an Azo engine if you want to go for a superior ride. You've got so many options with this deck. It's insane. And I really like this deck because of that. You could even run Spectral Duke stuff if you want. But like I said before, I do not want to make this into a Spectral Duke deck or make it feel like that, because the minute I ride Spectral Duke, there's no reason to go back to Prominence Core. But in that, tell me what you guys think of it, give me some other suggestions, what other better cards, and see you all next time.